Let's start by making our pastry dough for the chicken pot pie. It's going to be a heaping cup of all-purpose white flour super heaper, and then a frozen stick of butter grated on a box grater in the medium holes. You don't need to do it too small, but just make sure it's straight out of the freezer. And be careful you don't cut your little finger. Put it on a sheet pan or a plate and set aside. Mix some herbs into your flour for the crust. We're also going to put salt in here, about a teaspoon or so of salt, and just mix the herbs, mix the butter in. When you incorporate the butter, just do it a little bit at a time, stir it up with your hands so the flour coats it, a little at a time, coat it. And it really is remarkably similar to making a biscuit dough, so you could consult that video, which is one of my first videos I made. So just squeeze it in between your fingers and work it and have it resemble a coarse meal. That's what they say, and that's what I'm saying now. You're going to have a little ice water on the side, and ice water volume is going to differ based on where you live. Well, this is if anyone's paid attention to what I'm doing. It's very hard, if you're in Colorado or Texas or something like that, is so much drier. So you really have to eyeball it. That being said, this is about a cup of ice water. So just start with a cup of ice water, and then once it begins to come together a little bit, and you say to yourself, oh, I could work this as a mass, then you can dump it out onto your work surface and begin to bring it together into one solid ball, or two, which is what you should do. Okay, so I'm going to stop eating while doing the voiceover. So work it together, get all the bits together, and it's going to resemble a pretty wet piece of dough. And you actually can get this thing pretty silky smooth. And at the end of this, I want to make a note of this. You are going to divide this into two balls, which is not what I do. But I've decided that would definitely be a better strategy when making the pot pie. Don't overanalyze the kneading. Just work it.
Hello? Hello?
This is Manfrotto. This is the rewards department with card member services.
Son of a bitch!
Okay, so it's the same shit as everything else. Just bring the ball together. Only difference is there's no yeast in it, so you can just you could slam something down that has yeast in it. It's going to still rise. But just pat it down and to a disc. But you're going to do 2 discs. And then do what I did with the saran wrap, cover it, and then put it in a, at that moment, overcrowded fridge. You don't need to kiss that. Go ahead and let it rest in the fridge for at least an hour. Pull it from the fridge. Again, this is going to be 2 balls for you, presumably, or hopefully. Spray some cooking spray on 2 equally sized baking dishes, and then begin rolling out the dough on a clean and large work surface. I used a mixture of all-purpose flour and cornmeal to roll it out because I wanted to make sure that the dough did not stick as frequently. Although this crust I do keep a little bit wet. I just make sure that I use a lot of flour when dusting it and rolling it out and shaping it, because I'd rather have a little bit of retained moisture than a super dry crust. All right, so now where you're going to cut it, and this is not going to be an issue for you because you're not going to do this, because I've thought about the fact that it would just be easier to make 2 discs separately. But if you want to make 1 disc for, maybe you don't want to put the top on and you want to save some calories because it's just butter and flour. So maybe you want to save some calories. You just want to do a bottomless pot pie or a topless pot pie. You would just do 1 disc and then maybe you stop there. But just pop it in the greased dish, crimp it around the edge, and just make sure it's nice and formed. to the edge that all the parts are stuck, that the air has escaped from underneath the crust. And then you can put the other glass dish on top, 375 in the oven for, I think I did about 25 minutes. Recipe's in the description, all right? I got a PDF there, too, for you, so kiss my ass if you're going to complain. Look at that beautiful butter I put in there that immediately got darkened by the black soot from the cast iron pot. This is 3 tablespoons of butter, which we're going to start building our pot pie filling from. It's about medium-high heat. This is a remainder of the mirepoix from the chicken noodle soup. We're just going to do the same cut, the same carrot gauge, and just let it roll. Saute the vegetables down, very much similar to the chicken noodle soup. And then I did deglaze the pan with some white wine and brought up the whatever, if there was a fond establishing itself on the bottom, then it is now incorporated. And then put your thawed peas in or your frozen peas. I've never really noticed much of a difference except for perhaps cook time being longer by, I don't know, a minute. Flour is going to go in once the peas and vegetables are all cooked down, and you're just going to make sure that it's nice and coated. Everything's coated, and it's going to have this kind of like heavy, wet textural look to it. Look at that, see? That's what you want. Because, I mean, it's not, it's not a roux per se, like how you would build a roux on before you did all this and then put the vegetables in. If you're making mac and cheese or something like that, you're going to want to put the flour on the vegetables and have them resemble that. Quart of chicken stock in, and then the other half of our full butchered and poached chicken, which we created the stock with. Cup of heavy cream, and you got that nice butter layer and fat layer on top. We are going to bring this up to a boil and then simmer it. In the meantime, head over to the oven, check the crust. How does the crust look? Looks good because, obviously it's a little bit pale right now, but it has to go in the oven for another 45 minutes. So that was about a half hour, and now we are continuing to simmer, evaporate a little more of the liquid, and thicken up this pot pie filling. And salt and pepper, nice amount of salt and pepper. Remember, the chicken stock was unseasoned. And this probably takes 10 or 15 minutes, and we're not trying to make this into a thick, creamy soup because there's so much fat in this, and it's so hot that, yes, it's thin now. But when you put this, if you were to put this in the fridge, it'll solidify into a block. A block of heart-clogging food. So I put it in a little pan here, a little hotel pan, and I put it on the side. I want it to cool a little bit before we put it in the crust. But see how it's nice and thin because really it's going to still evaporate over the course of 45 minutes. And it's more of, the pot pie that I make, it's not like a... I generally serve it on a plate, like a nice plate that's large enough, or a large enough lipped plate, or bowl even, to... It's like a soup with a biscuit on the bottom and the top. That's how this pot pie is. Okay, so I egg washed the upper crust with the mantle. I did it on the cutting board, which I would never do again. I was trying to make it so that the steam didn't interfere with the crust while I was putting it on the pot pie, because that's been a trouble in the past. But I mean, I still got it. It's still fine. It came out whatever, worked. But I wouldn't do that again. I would just put it on. I would put the crust on top first. I would crimp the edge, and then egg wash the top. And I cut it. I also cut it after egg washing it, which was another mistake. So just cut it before because it's much easier to cut. You can take the tines of a fork, push it down, and yeah, just the holes are obviously going to serve as, not obviously, I mean, I don't know how intelligent you are. You might be dumb as a fucking brick. The holes will allow steam to escape. So just pop it in the oven for another 45 minutes until it is done, golden brown, yada, yada, yada. Now, the amount of filling that I say in the recipe is for 2 pot pies. Or you reserve it, you heat it up on the side, and then you kind of dump it over the top. Look at this. You see that lip? That's a nice lipped edge. Thank you for joining me, guys. Bye-bye.